Hello and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today that is all around transforming healthcare IT with Citrix Secure Digital Workspace. So presenting the webinar today, we have Jonathan and Alex from Citrix.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed, Amy. And good afternoon, everyone, on a Wednesday afternoon. Without sounding like a local radio show host, it's a beautiful sunny day here in London. John Murden and I are here presenting for the next 40 minutes. We actively welcome any questions at the end. The purpose of this webinar, we're going to run through an agenda at the moment, but the purpose of this webinar is for those of you who use Citrix, we want to talk about where it kind of fits into the bigger picture, transformational journeys, Windows 10, all those good things. And for those of you who don't use Citrix, but Windows 10 is a problem, or it's something that's popped up on your radar, we want to discuss about where we fit in the world. So without further ado, we're going to run through the agenda to make sure that's all relevant and useful for everybody. So my name is Alex Shepley. I have been with Citrix for coming up 4 years now. My focus is predominantly healthcare, but it's always been local, central, and NHS government. Only ever looked after the public sector, so we've never had, we've never been in the midst of the big bad banks. My wife is an intensive care nurse. Mum was a teacher, and brother's an officer in the Navy. So we've got an affinity with really, having a higher purpose than just turning up to make a profit. I'm going to hand over to Jonathan Murden. So I'm very proud to say that I was heavily involved in pinching John Murden from Portsmouth NHS. It's a strategy of ours here at Citrix to basically hire folk who culturally fit in, but also have been there, done that, got the t-shirt, done it in the real world. Theoretically, it's all great, but actually practical experience we find incredibly valuable. So, John, do you want to give a quick overview of where we poached you from?
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Yeah, so I'm John Murden. I'm a senior systems engineer at Citrix. I've been with Citrix now for 14 months, and prior to that, as Alex said, worked for Portsmouth NHS for just under 7 years, just shy of 7 years. And while they're at Portsmouth, had a number of different roles. They like a title change in the NHS, as some of you may well know. So I was infrastructure operations manager, infrastructure architect, lead architect, etc. So a number of different titles there. But my main time there was spent looking after the architects team, but also delivering a Citrix solution to really transform how the hospital and the IT staff, the clinical staff, access IT through a virtual desktop approach. So I'm going to cover off a bit about that today and give you some insights into what that was like to deliver and deploy, but then also some of the benefits really of that and how it's really changed and transformed IT and how apps and desktops are delivered at Portsmouth.
Perfect, thanks, John. So our agenda. I'm going to cover off a bit of, where is Citrix today? I think as an organization, we've changed quite a lot. So I'm going to hopefully give you an overview of where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. And then between us, so John's going to discuss, how the world has changed for our customers, what digital transformation means, and ultimately what are the drivers for it. We're going to do an overview of what is our clinical workspace. Crucially, for those that are already Citrix customers, we're going to talk about how we would go about delivering Windows 10, how we would go about these changes, benefits and feedback that we've had from real customers and quotes that we're extremely proud of. And then the first, what does day one look like? Let's get started on moving forwards, and then questions. So hopefully that covers everything. It's quite wide-reaching webinar. So let's start from the top. Where is Citrix today? Rewind 4 years. When I first joined the public sector team at Citrix, there was 2 of us, and the other person was desperately trying to escape. And then there was one, and that was me. So Citrix, in the last 4 years, we have grown the team to 10 people now. We've seen fantastic growth because the product set and the approach fits with what our customers are trying to do. And Citrix as an organization, when I joined, to give you an idea of success, when I joined, share prices at $55 a share, and it's now about $101 a share. which is a fairly rapid transformation. So what's kind of powering that? Well, partly it's because our move to the cloud has been seen as a positive thing. It's partly that our move to a subscription-based licensing model is seen as a good thing. And incidentally, Citrix is forecasting that by 2020, we think 60% of our revenue is going to be subscription-based. This is a slightly contentious issue in as far as for lots of our public sector customers, it's still about capital spend and it isn't about operational expenditure. So it doesn't fit everyone. However, we have flexible models, and I think as we're going forward, Citrix is much more comfortable the idea of you pay for what you use, which ultimately we've been doing in our private lives for a very long time. But actually, it's only just knocking on the door of the corporates. A lot of it is to do with the back-end mechanisms and not the intention from customers, but nevertheless, it is what it is. So Citrix today, we've recently taken on a Chief Technology Officer for healthcare. His name is Victor Rodriguez. He's based in Fort Lauderdale. Why is this significant? It's because he was poached from one of our biggest transformational customers over in the US. Which is one of our case studies that competed for the Innovation Award last year. So Victor has been there, done it, got the t-shirt. When he joined as the CTO for that organization, they were on 6.5, they were languishing. There was a reasonably uncomfortable relationship between IT and the end users. And when Victor left, they were up for Innovation Awards. IT was seen as a catalyst for change, and it was really positive. So we brought Victor on because not only are we investing very heavily in healthcare as a market because we think our solution is relevant and results would indicate that's true, but also because it's poacher turned gamekeeper. Rather like John joining us here, what we're looking for is people that have been there, done it, and got the t-shirts. So Citrix is on a very exciting journey. I think we're not going to talk about cloud in broad terms today. Cloud in the Citrix case is a little disingenuous because it implies we are it's a public cloud offering. It isn't necessarily. It's Citrix as a service, and if we could go back and rename it, I think that's what we would do. We might touch upon it lightly for those customers that are already on a Citrix journey, but that's not really the point of this. So I think I'll hand over to John so we can get started, and John can talk us through how the world has changed in his eyes.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I think it's some background really to how the world has changed from an IT department's perspective. I think probably a lot of you out there, if you've been working in IT as long as I have, which is coming up 20 years now, I remember the days where the managing of the users and IT was a pretty straightforward affair. Most of our users had one device, and that was the desktop PC, box under their desk. Probably one of those like cream colored PCs back in the day, I remember. Mobile phones were just a Nokia 6210 if you were lucky and posh and had Bluetooth in your car. The apps were fairly straightforward, your office and a couple of core productivity apps. And your location, you went to your office and that's where you worked. And you knew where your data was. You had a pretty straightforward working life, and from an IT department, it was quite well defined. You knew where everything was. You could manage those devices and that data and those apps in a fairly straightforward manner. I think if we fast forward now, not too long really, it's the rapid progression of IT. It moves at such a fast pace now. If I think about my mum as an example, from having a PC and a laptop and me getting regular support calls to turn it off and back on again, to now she bought her first iPhone and an iPad and I don't hear from her anymore. She's got a device that really meets all of her needs and she can consume and use herself without needing any real support. It suits the way she wants to work. Rather than it's just a Windows device that's been thrust upon her. So it's that's kind of mentality I think we need to have in our heads about how the people in the business are changing. They want to work how they want to work, and I think that the rise of the millennials and people wanting to work on any device and anywhere is a really big thing. So we fast forward a little bit, we can see it's become more difficult to manage. That those users are now roaming, they're now working out of different sites from a clinical perspective. That could be in a patient's home, that could be at a different hospital or a different trust even. trying to access back to their clinical apps or their clinical data. And those apps are not necessarily just straightforward business apps. There's apps they're consuming from the cloud. There's NHS apps from the spine. There's many different ways to get to your clinical information, your clinical apps. Devices have proliferated massively in the NHS. We all know about needing iPods and iPads for some of those clinical care applications like VitalPack. And really trying to meet the needs of all of our users from wanting to access their IT in a different manner, in a more mobile way. And then keeping control of that data as well is a big issue there. Where is the data? Is it in a cloud service? Is it on a local file storage in a data center? Or has it somehow got onto a PC or a laptop's local drive? Or even a personal device? Those kind of things are a bit of an unknown. So that edge of your network, that edge of control is kind of blurred really, and it's much more complex now to manage where everything is and how everything works, and keep it all consistent and secure. So I think it's a really key thing to have in our minds is we know this has happened to us, but it's how do we regain control? How do we change the way we're providing those apps, that data, that clinical mobility, and provide it in a more secure and better, consistent way that meets that user experience, that user expectation they've perhaps got with their personal iPhone or Netflix that they use. That mentality now is very common. They want it to work in the same way it does when they're at home. So if I rewind a bit to my Portsmouth days, I've seen on the call there's a few guys from Portsmouth on there right now. When I first joined Portsmouth about 7 years ago, I was brought in with a VDI project in mind, but they didn't really know what that VDI project was. So something to bear in mind is I rather than try and tackle it with a technical solution and just come up with a technical design and force it onto people's desktops, I spent a good 6 weeks out there with clinicians out there in the hospital, meeting clinicians, understanding the user experience, and finding that poor user experience, that slow log on, those locked PCs, those shared usernames and passwords. There's all sorts of manner of IT issues out there. That the inconsistency of the desktop image was rife. Apps not working on certain devices. Various versions of Java that stopped things working, various versions of IE. It was a real minefield of IT out there, and a pretty tough place to be productive and to work consistently. More often than not, the clinicians were just shunning IT and sticking with pens and paper and perhaps sharing desktops, which was a big no-no. So it was a pretty poor experience. Another thing to note was there's a number of big clinical application delivery projects that had failed, and on some part of that failure was the fact that the trust was unable, IT was unable to deliver that application consistently to every device in the environment. So you imagine a clinician's going onto his ward expecting his new clinical app to be there on every PC and finds it's only working on one or two of the machines in the ward or in his consulting rooms. So it was pretty bad. One of the things I kept core really to that plan really, once I saw how bad and sort of the varying issues that were genuinely going on out there, was how can we provide some mobility, redesign that workplace, but all the time keeping security and compliance at the core. I think the security side of things was a big fact for me, because what was out there at the moment wasn't as secure as it should be. And how do we redefine that security? How do we make the clinicians more compliant, but all the time keeping that user experience optimized and actually giving them a better experience whilst also providing better security?
I think that's a really interesting point. John's coming from a place of experience with hands on deck. I can only talk about it from what we observe at our customers. One thing I would say is that our best Citrix environments out there, IT have a champion user, and they've almost got a panel out there kind of feeding back and reviewing their work, but also proactively support them in driving adoption. For those of you that do, great. For those of you that don't, finding friends out there in your user groups who can either give you honest feedback or certainly try and get people on side and adopting the technology. That's a big transformation piece. We often see that it's not the technology which is prohibitive, it's the structure of the teams and it's the relationships throughout the hospital. Broadly speaking, that can make a massive difference to a project straight off the bat if you've got the right stakeholders involved.
Yeah, I think that's key. It's about getting user engagement and people excited about what it is you're going to deliver to them. At the core of the design of the idea was this virtual desktop. That was always key to it. But actually partnering with Citrix, which is what we did, we came up with a design that put the user at the center and sort of moved that secure edge that was forever changing with the new way of IT to actually around the user. So how can we just secure that user, provide them a secure desktop, a secure clinical desktop, where all of their apps work consistently, they have the right versions of browsers or applications to do their day-to-day work, but also how can we deliver it securely and effectively across a pretty complex hospital environment. And it was around using that Citrix Secure Digital Workspace was key to solving the problem. So we moved to that virtual desktop plan, and I'll talk a bit about now how we actually deployed it, how we came up with the solution, and how we made it a success in a hospital that is very cash strapped at the time. It's a Carillion PFI hospital, Portsmouth, so it has a number of difficulties there around raising capital for these kind of projects. But I'll go into a bit of detail about how we managed to do that and how we managed to make it such a success across a large complex estate. So this is a picture I've pinched from a presentation we did at Portsmouth. The project manager there used this diagram to really show the complexity of the hospital. These are the real floors of the hospital up on the right there, A, B, C through to G. And these are the real departments and areas within the core hospital. So we did try and build a business case and then go for executive sponsorship and funding, and that was immediately rejected. There was just no buy-in there from the trust. There wasn't the money to pay for what seemed like quite a price tag of a project. So what we utilized was a fund for replacing PCs. We diverted some of that fund into buying thin clients and building a Citrix platform, using Citrix Consulting Services to support us in building that platform, and delivered a very small pilot, around 350 users in the renal department. There you see at the top of the screen, on the G floor, renal it's a very insular department in an acute hospital. They are very exclusive in terms of how they work, where their patients are, and it was quite an easy department to keep a pretty heavy live POC sort of containerized, without it spreading further across the hospital and ending up going into a full deployment without meaning to. So we spent 6 months in renal, myself and the architects team who were delivering this, actually embedded in the department. We actually worked there from day to day. We relocated ourselves from the IT department, which was 4 miles down the road. I think that's a really key factor there, is about being visible to the staff when you make such a transformational change as this, moving from a physical PC to a virtual desktop. And we were there to help and support and refine the solution. So that 6 months was spent coming up with that ultimate golden image, that single image we could then deliver to all those virtual desktops, but also onboarding clinicians, making them embrace the technology and realize the benefits of having a virtual desktop that followed them around their ward round, that followed them to remote renal sites that they could access from home. It really was a game changer, and having that weight of opinion behind it, that positive opinion from those clinicians, was really key to sort of the next stages of getting funding and support in the hospital.
So just touching on something which John mentioned there, which is all about either reappropriation of devices or what is out there. The challenge a lot of our customers are facing with Windows 10 is how many devices are not Windows 10 fit and ready. So we can help with that. Now, whether or not it's repurposing them, basically turning them into a thin client, or being able to deliver a virtual experience and not requiring a load of physical kit. These are ways that you can roll out Windows 10 quicker. So a lot of our customers kind of stand back, look at what percentage of the estate is capable of basically installing Windows 10, what percentage isn't, and actually that's a good way to free up some budget to look at this project. Microsoft themselves think that it's between 25 and 30% of NHS devices aren't capable of running Windows 10. I dare say once you start looking in drawers, in wards, and once you start, looking down the back of the sofa, I think that number might be a little bit higher. So it's certainly something worth considering when looking to address this as a project.
Yeah, it's interesting, the Windows 10, and if you look at the latest version of Office, it needs a minimum of 4 gig, I think, the latest version of Office 2019. So the machines are going to be expected to be more and more powerful to support the latest and greatest, whether it's Windows 10 or Office 365 or what have you. So I think it's worth bearing in mind, moving to a virtual desktop estate gives you a lot more flexibility in how you can provision those machines and how you can give them the right amount of power for the right amount of users. We went back to the board after that renal pilot. It was a huge success. But unfortunately, again, we were rejected on the price tag. So we took the step, really. It was a bit of a gamble, but we decided to try emergency medicine next, A&E. And if we were going to make a difference, that was the most under pressure department with the most issues. So if we're going to make a difference and make a real eye opener for the board and for clinicians alike, that was the place to do it. So we took that pretty refined desktop that we knew was rock solid in terms of highly available and a golden image that worked with all the core clinical applications into ED. And it was a huge success there as well. We actually changed, the way patient flow. There was more computers on wheels were delivered. There was ease of access to IT now with a desktop that followed a clinician as he moved through the emergency department. And it really changed how they worked and took some of the pressure off. Not all, because it's a very, very busy department, but it did relieve some of the pressures there. It also gave a bigger voice to our project. We had now some very key clinicians, very high up consultants who were now willing to stand up and present this to the board with us. And with the weight of that support, we were able to receive full funding then for the project. So that gamble paid off, and we were funded for a project that we could run over 2 years and to deliver the solution with a noticeable budget handed to us to do this. A few of the key things to note about the project and the project team. I think it's not just about change to the way IT is delivered in the trust in terms of virtual desktops and moving to this follow me desktop kind of world, but it's also the IT department had to change. So there was a bit of reluctance from some of the service desk and desktop engineering team who thought it was going to be taking jobs because suddenly there's a thin client out there and they couldn't go and turn PCs off and on and swap machines around and drive around different hospitals, because it was all central. There was a single golden image in the data center we manage now, and the thin client was really just a dumb endpoint. But actually what we did was we built a team taking staff from the desktop engineers, taking staff from the data center, architects, service desk personnel, networking personnel, and created a very diverse team to deliver this solution and embedded that team in the hospital. So as we went around each department, the team would embed itself in that department for a number of months, ensuring we were visible, we were there to help with any issues, and really it acted like a giant spring clean. So whilst the teams were in, they would discover apps we didn't know about, access databases galore, PCs that we were stored under desks that we didn't know had patient data on them or a patient database. there was lots of really wonderful things that were discovered. So not only did the project deliver this transformational virtual desktop approach, but it actually did a giant spring clean of each department and gave IT a real handle on every single department, how they used their IT, how they interacted with IT, and what was important to them in terms of clinical applications. So it was a real benefit.
I think this stuff is incredibly relevant to hopefully everyone on the call, because we all know of fantastic technologies that have fallen flat on their face because it wasn't rolled out correctly. It didn't have people buy in and get the assistance that you wanted. We're always listening to our customers about what's gone well and what hasn't. Just, as a side note and a bit of an off the cuff idea, one of our large customers actually used us to make a case study video, which is on YouTube, and it was all about the cultural adoption of this new working without walls policy, aka you don't have a desk anymore, it's a hot desking place, you can work from home, you can work for your local coffee shop, you can bring your own device, we don't mind, all you need to do is to log on to this system and you can get all your apps and your data. Well, they did a video and commissioned a video via us to do this, which is the best training thing you can do. It didn't, anyone can go on YouTube and watch it. And it was a little bit of corporate, you should be proud of where you work and this is our new world. And it was a little bit of IT training. These are the sort of things that make our working lives a success. And if there's one thing we're trying to do as a vendor, we're desperately trying to make sure our software, all the latest and greatest, is utilized, so that, yes, okay, on the back end, it makes your admin lives way easier when rolling it out, managing it, but ultimately users see the greatest benefit. And if you've got happy users that are motivated and have a positive relationship with IT, what you find is a lot of stuff goes well. And I think one of the biggest blessings but biggest curses we see as Citrix employees is we are front and center of what users see. If something goes wrong, it doesn't matter if it was Citrix or not. More often than not, it isn't Citrix, I would say that. But the first thing users do will say, oh, Citrix is down again. It's great, but I tell you what, at house parties where I've, not that my house parties are particularly wild, but people say, what do you do and where are you from? And they say, oh, I work for Citrix. Oh, we've got that at work, oh, blah, blah, blah. And they give you an absolutely straight up opinion. They do not sugarcoat it at all. Some it's fantastic and we know the organizations in question, some it isn't. And we also know those organizations in question. And ultimately, you guys are taking your time on a Wednesday afternoon to hop on a webinar to think about and to discuss this stuff. We want to support you in the right way. So these cultural learnings about how to drive a successful implementation of a project are incredibly relevant.
Yeah, I think, onboarding users, making user adoption key for the project was a big part of the success, really. We ensured that there was a readiness assessment of each of these departments you see on the screen there, where we would say, do you have a room for us that we can embed ourselves in, where we can store things? Do you have a list of all of your users, a list of your core clinical apps? There's like a checklist. So before we went in to deliver, we had to make sure we were going to be able to deliver it successfully in that department.
Perfect. So I'm very mindful of time. We've got 15 minutes. So shall we march through to the next bit?
Yep.
One thing we've talked about a little bit about the method, a little bit how it's all going to work. So I think really what we want to talk about is how does the experience, what is the Citrix experience now for our customers? One of the most interesting exercises we did, in recent times when we were competing for a virtual desktop project is a friend of my wife's actually did the job for a different hospital, but we went out and we spent a bit of time with her to understand what a day in the life looked like. This is quite literally driving how we develop the product, and it's driving how we, where our investment as an organization, where our investment is going. So this slide is kind of a little fun, it's a little cheesy, but John, if you want to talk through roughly what this looks like.
Yeah, I don't know why it's displaying the animation not quite correctly there, but anyway.
Well, we can happily move on and circulate these slides afterwards.
Yeah, it was just really to give a bit of a graphical view of what that experience is like now, but it looks like it's not quite redrawn the screen properly. So basically, the clinician would start at home and log into his desktop, and then desktop would then follow him around the site. But as you can see, the graphic has gone a bit haywire on this one.
Our user is getting lost behind a graphic, which is not what we want to happen to any of our users.
I mean, I think it was just to show the follow me desktop experience that clinicians, would literally log in at home, bring up their patient list, come into the hospital. That desktop would be exactly where they left off with their patient list ready in the consulting room. And then that desktop would follow them out to a remote clinic or to a patient home or what have you. So, yeah, apologies for that, not quite working properly there.
It's all these fancy PowerPoint slideshows. Hopefully the next one will work. Right. So this slide is kind of a pictorial one, and we'll go ahead and build it out here about what are the real end user benefits of the secure digital workspace for our healthcare customers. Now, what I would draw your attention to is all of these things are very different on the priority list for all of our customers. For some of our customers, WannaCry was, not to put too fine a point on it, catastrophic. For some of our customers, it was a 4-hour problem on a Saturday night, and that was put to bed, depending on how it was implemented and depending on how it worked. For some organizations, the reduced costs and support overhead because they've got an expensive desktop refresh project is top of the priority list. For others, it was already a reasonably well-run thing, so that didn't matter so much. To all of your respective organizations, you kind of have to decide what sits at the top of your priority list. But no two customers of ours have bought Citrix for the same reason. I would say that much. One thing I would touch on here is the notion of bring your own device and the Zen Mobile thing. What we're seeing in some hospitals is the F1s and the F2s and the baby docs are coming in, and they want to use their own devices and they want to access patient identifiable data. This is all part of the extension of creating a digital working world for these guys, and it's something they're pretty much used to at home, therefore they expect it at work. Security and compliance, particularly with regard to working with your security folk, is paramount to making this successful. There are ways to do it, but it is not terribly straightforward, so you need to make sure you jump through the right hoops, and we're very happy to pick up in a separate session about how to be successful with a BYOD project, particularly with mobile application management on users' own devices in the clinical setting. I also think that we are seeing we're certainly seeing a revolution where people who work for NHS and the clinicians, all they want to do is be put by patient bedside. That's the most important thing, and they will lean to any technology that allows them to do that. Both the hospitals my wife has worked at in the last 7 years have gone from paper-based systems to tablet-based systems at the end of the bed. She's broadly seen it as an extremely positive thing. It was a big enabler by IT. Yes, it was a big project, and they had to do all the training, other bits and pieces, but that's been transformational for them. So while we're talking about the theme of transformational, understanding what really matters to your end users is incredibly important. And if you get it right, then there'll be a big advocate of your service.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, Alex. I think there's numerous benefits came out of this. Some of them we didn't even expect, in terms of being able to provide the Portsmouth Clinical Portal, where other trusts and other healthcare providers could access our clinical information, clinical apps securely on other trusts and other devices. So it was that was a bit of a knock-on benefit. Portsmouth also host a cancer service for ARIA Medonc for the South Central, so there's a bit of a revenue generation there from that. And another positive we got was the outsourcing of the clinical digital dictation department, where it wasn't down to making people redundant. There were just less and less people with that clinical typing skill in the Portsmouth area. So a number of those elements have been outsourced now to India using the Citrix Secure Desktop as the secure delivery method. So no patient data actually leaves the UK, leaves that that data center, but is being processed and typed and worked on in Mumbai in India securely. So that was again another positive that came out of this without us realizing it. You know, without the Citrix technology, we wouldn't have been able to say yes to that project when it was brought to us. So yeah, it's and then at the center there, it's about returning time to care. That was core to the business case. Something we did was time how long users were taking to log in each day, and when we'd followed a clinician, and we estimated there was hours and hours of wasted time there, logging into PCs, logging into clinical apps, time and time again. We actually had a clinician who stood up for us at a presentation and said that he was saving 2 hours a day from his old way of working, and that time he was saving, he was spending more time with his patients. He was able to see more patients. So that was something in the business case, although we just couldn't put a figure to it for the finance guys. They wanted a figure, and we couldn't put one to it really. It's more about improving the efficiencies of the hospital and improving patient outcomes was key.
And for the record, neither can we. So Citrix, we do quite a lot of white papers, we do quite a lot of business cases, and we get very heavily involved in these transformational projects. But some of our organizations, when we look at time saving, they'll turn around and say, well, we're paying these people anyway, they're on the books, it doesn't matter if they're spending time walking around doing paper files or if they've got IT by the bedside. That might be a little bit short-termist, but nevertheless, it's a perspective we've run across. So what I would say again is, when you're building the business case, it's understanding what your end users want and a champion really. So moving swiftly on.
Yeah, so these are just some of the emails we received from clinical staff. As the project progressed, really, there was a lot of positive emails we received by the IT department, by the head of IT, and these are just some of the statements from those members of staff around the benefits they found in the solution. You know, and that last one there, when can we get it? As the project progressed, we had staff beating down our door to get the solution, and we ended up having to double the size of the deployment team just to keep up with the demand. So it was such a positive change that there's now a much better relationship there between the hospital and IT, and I think it means future technology projects and EHR EHR programs are going to be received in a more positive manner and be able to be delivered more consistently and successfully because of this sort of foundation of this virtual desktop and virtual app delivery method.
Perfect. So Windows 10, everyone is acutely aware of the arrangement via bytes, so they can obviously apply to get the Windows 10 E5 license, which includes virtualization rights. A certain amount of the hospitals have also applied to get the license for the CALs as well to go with. So we've got it's certainly a work in motion now. What we are seeing is it's probably one of the best and most exciting opportunities our customers have had for a very long time to revisit their desktop strategy. It's sufficiently behemoth that they can't. It's not an overnight thing. It's not a flashbang thing. It's a very much a methodical. Where are we going as an organisation, and how do we want to deliver this? It's a good point to draw a line in the sand and have a look. So there's a few things. For our Citrix customers, you can create a test and dev environment in the cloud. You can work on a compatibility piece with all the applications anyway, and you can effectively do a trial run before it ever sees any end users. And in the morning when people log off and they come back in, they'll get a Windows 10 desktop, which is a really exciting proposition for us. It's a transformation for a lot of people who would potentially been on some pretty antiquated kit on a very antiquated OS. It's a journey though. So what we want to kind of say around this is the Citrix and Microsoft partnership is the strongest it has ever been. They have done something we believe is very good for the NHS as a whole, because nobody wants to be in a position where they've got XP machines still kicking around underneath desks causing us a headache. So how can we embrace this change and use Windows 10 to change the game? John, do you want to talk us through? There's a couple of tools which could be relevant to our audience.
Yeah, so with Citrix, that part of the product set is a product called App DNA, which will give you the ability to analyze all of your application estate and give you a very simple traffic light kind of report to say whether the apps will run successfully on Windows 10, or if they won't, why not, and give you some pointers to perhaps other options you could look at, such as AppV or publishing them with XenApp. So that's a really powerful tool to use. And from a Windows 10 perspective as well, I think it's worth pointing out the rapid rate Microsoft are wanting you to upgrade. So like you say, this is a bit of a turning point. How do we deliver Windows 10? I think it's a great opportunity to look at doing it differently, because to keep up with that rapid deployment, that rapid upgrade cycle that Microsoft are providing, I know they've extended it now to 30 months. That's still pretty rapid for NHS and clinical applications providers. We know there's enough of our app estates out there from NHS IT perspective that just isn't going to work on Windows 10, let alone a Windows 10 desktop that's undergoing more rapid updates perhaps than in previous iterations such as XP and Windows 7. So changing the way you deliver that Windows 10 desktop, I think is a great opportunity to do that now. I mean, you'll never get rid of all your PCs. That's just not going to happen. But reducing that to a very small estate is a great opportunity right now with virtualization for Windows 10.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're pretty much there for our time. We've been 44 minutes. Hopefully the key takeaway, and there's going to be some questions, but the key takeaway here is engage with the end users, get some champions on board, start small, land and expand, and build out the use case, and basically win your organizations over with a positive message, which is this is truly transformational. It's changing the way we work. How can we do it more effectively, and how can we do more of it? We've got a lot of experience with going on the journey with our customers, and we stay with them for as long as they want us, until they're bored of us. So we'd be very happy, anyone on the call, if you want to pursue any further themes in this, particularly around where we fit into the healthcare market and where we can help you with Windows 10, we would be delighted to do so. But thank you very much for listening to our webinar this afternoon. We are around for any questions if you have any.
Brilliant. Thanks, John, and thanks, Alex. I can pass that over to my screen. So yeah, as mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we will hold a Q&A session now. So if you do have any questions, there's a questions box. If you just write those in there, I'll read those out. And there's also our email address on the screen and a phone number if you would like to submit any outside of the webinar today. We have had some come through already, so I'll just... Okay, so David has asked two, so I'll ask the first one. How do you manage the semi-annual upgrade cycle whilst maintaining a single golden image through the various update channels?
So from a golden image perspective, I would look to remove the OS layer using a capability you get with Citrix now, which is app layering and provisioning services. So I would retain that golden image in a very clean state so you can update it. And then using app layering, layer on those applications as separate layers when building that golden image. One thing we did at Portsmouth in terms of a capability there, because this was a number of years back, was use AppV to deliver a lot of the application set. So the golden image tends to just have core applications on Office, Adobe, and some of the other add-ins that you need. The rest of the application set is either delivered with AppV or with XenApp. So there's XenApp farms dedicated to publishing certain clinical applications, certain older versions of IE, and things that the clinicians still need to work. Those environments are kept very secure and retained in a more stable state, so that you can upgrade that OS without impacting your application layers. So the cleaner that golden image is, the better, from my perspective. And if you look at the roadmap for Microsoft, they're moving to MSIX as being the development model for applications. That is going to separate that application layer from the OS, and I think that's Microsoft's strategy going forward, so that you can keep up with this rapid update cycle without impacting your applications.
Another thing I would add is that if you are in active subscription maintenance with Citrix, you are entitled to all of these tools. So the one John talked about there, which was app layering, that came from our acquisition of Unidesk a couple of years ago. That is for all customers, whether you're enterprise or platinum or standard, whatever you're on, as long as you're in active subs.
I mean, something with PVS as well, just to give a real life example, there was a patch that we did at Portsmouth many years back that basically broke a core print driver. But because we had PVS and this stateless streamed image, the rollback on that was literally a matter of minutes to roll back to the previous image without that patch on, and resolve the issues as soon as the calls started coming through to the service desk. So you've got a lot more capability to very rapidly roll back to a previous stable image if you do happen to put out there in the wild an update that wipes files, as Windows from Microsoft found just recently.
Hopefully that answers the question. Amy, there was a second part to the question.
Yes, the second question from David here. He said, also keen to understand how you manage Office 365 off-prem mailboxes, in brackets if using, and the need for local storage / caching.
So included now again in the license with Microsoft, with Citrix, is a product called Citrix WEM, Workspace Environment Manager, and combined with our Citrix User Profile Manager, UPM, you now have the capability to manage that OST file as it basically converts that cached OST into a VHDX file and stores it within the user's profile. It also creates a VHDX file for indexing, so you're able to fully search on that mailbox. So we're now providing a supported level of the OST file management that Microsoft fully support, rather than having to output that OST onto a network share, which is not a supported method, or run users in an online exchange mode, which can be problematic. So yeah, the technology is there. It's all included as part of the Citrix license, and I would be happy to show that product to anyone that wants to see that.
WEM has been a really big thing for us. So the Workspace Environment Manager piece, we're getting brilliant user feedback from it. It's helping a lot of our customers. So it's if you guys are on one of the later versions, and as long as we're not back in the 6s and the 5s, as long as we're at least in the 7s or 7.18, so we can have a conversation about that. At the very least, it's something to aim for, and there's a really good business case behind it. So we'll be happy to pick that up. Feel free to email alex.shepley@citrix.com or jonathan.murden@citrix.com, and we can help you with that. Cool. Any others, Amy?
Thanks, guys. Yeah, so there's one here from James. He said, he's asked how Citrix deal with the M365 Evergreen upgrade cycle.
I think we've pretty much covered that on the first one, Amy, in terms of keeping it updated, using provisioning services to sort of keep that gold image clean and be able to rapidly upgrade and patch it whilst keeping the application layer separate, using tools such as app layering, which you get with our tool set, or again, taking the approach of sort of app V, Zen app, and so on, removing as much of that application layer so that golden image can be rapidly updated without impacting the applications that run on it.
Okay, thanks, guys. So if there are any more questions, just pop those in the questions box. I'll read those out. We'll just wait a minute or so to see if any more come through.
Just to the last question, by the way, I think it was M0365. So we just need to check if he was referring to the relationship between Intune and Citrix Zen Mobile, which we'll be very happy to pick up. So Amy, if you can just send the contact details for that chat, we'll be more than happy to answer that for him.
That's fine. I think that might be all the questions that we've got today. I think so. So thank you everyone for joining the webinar today and taking the time out of your busy afternoons. And thank you so much, John and Alex, for presenting. I hope you all found it valuable. As mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, I'll send you all a link to the recording most probably tomorrow morning. Yeah, so thank you for your time today. And if you could fill out the feedback form at the end, that we'd really appreciate that. So if you would like any further information, just pop that in there and we will be in touch. So enjoy the rest of your afternoons, everyone, and thank you for joining today. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.